We are live.
We are.
It
Hello,
has
everybody.
been a while since you've seen these two ugly fuckers together, but there we
It
are,
is.
back at it.
I've been in fucking two different countries and sick since last time we were here. So, fucking mad things.
We have got the invite over to Mr. Strauss.
Yeah. As always, we had some technical difficulties because we are technically difficult.
Yeah. Oh.
So, yeah, good guest today. Well, I mean, it's always a good guest, but good guest today. Daniel Strauss. And hopefully next few days we'll have our next guest confirmed for you as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, fun times. Good to be back. Good to be back. I'm still dying a little bit, so I apologise in advance for when you hear my horrendous cough because it's still just awful.
Yeah. Quinny's dying, and I actually feel pretty good.
Yeah, so he's bragging now, isn't he? Well, there's Daniel anyway, so let's get to it.
Okay. Straight in. Nothing but the best.
Hello guys, how's it going?
Oh, good,
hey mate.
I'm trying to work out, is it coming through this mic?
I think so. It sounds pretty clear, so I'd assume so.
It's coming through here?
It sounds like there's not any the tapping.
You're not hearing. Okay, give me 2 seconds. Give me 2 seconds.
You are very clearly. I mean, your quality is probably better than ours. So.
Well, I mean, if I can get this to work, it might be even better. Give me 2 seconds. This plugged in. Oh, I don't know.
So we're not the only one who has technical issues. There we go.
Audio, mic. Oh, I don't think my thing's plugged in. Oh, well.
It's just the life of the podcast, isn't it? Just technical difficulties every week.
I know how it goes. Oh, it's because that microphone isn't plugged in. Oh, it is plugged in. Fuck it.
Okay. You're very clear, so
okay, that's good.
Yeah, you sound good. That's the main thing.
How's it going, guys? You all right?
Yeah, all
very good, man. Very good.
Good.
Apologies for the slight delay there.
That's all right. No problem at all.
You returned the favour, so it's all right.
How are you doing? You good?
Very good, thank you. Can't complain.
Excellent. I'm going to jump straight into it then. We are already live. So thank you so much for taking the time out to join us this evening.
My pleasure.
Real pleasure. So I'm going to jump straight into it. Cage Warriors just had the first show in Italy.
Yeah.
Huge success. What was that like for you to be the lead role on commentary?
Well, it's really difficult, the event was fantastic, but I've been working with Cage Warriors since basically I did one show in like 2019, I think. But really, I started working with Cage Warriors at the start of COVID. So my first real show with them, my second show altogether, but my first proper show with them was that first show, like the day that everything shut down. And then obviously since then, we've had loads of shows through the trilogy series. I think I've done like maybe 30 something events, 32 or 33 events. But I've always had old Brad Wharton as play-by-play, and he's fantastic, and he's just such a pro. He's so good. And unfortunately, he got COVID a couple of days beforehand, and we were hoping that he'd be kind of recovered and he would be testing negative by the time it rolled around, but it didn't. So my roles changed very dramatically, and it is really tough, actually. It's a really hard job. You've got to be really switched on the entire time. When you're doing color or the grappling that I am usually doing, it's very laid back, and I just let Brad do all of the work. But it was all on my shoulders this time, so it was a little bit nerve-wracking. And then we had Paddy with us, obviously. He was already arranged to be with me and Brad. And then with Brad gone, it was going to be, basically me and Brad were going to do our usual roles. And then Paddy was going to be brought in sort of as an extra. Yeah. And then everything changed and I took Brad's role and Paddy kind of took my role. But he was fantastic. He was really great. I think he just excelled at that. it's hard to know when someone has never done that before. And, you know, Paddy's such a eccentric character as well. I had no idea how that was going to translate over to the comms, but it was fantastic. And the show was brilliant. I mean, the atmosphere there was, it was really insane, especially for that main event. I said it on the mic on the night, but as the show went on, every single, obviously, because we had this insane scenario where the Italian fighters went 8-0. So every single time they'd fight and win, it was like the dial was being turned up more and more and more. And I don't think that main event would have been as crazy as it was had they not have already gone undefeated that night, 7-0 prior to it. And by the time that they were coming out, it was just, I've never felt anything like it.
Yeah, it's a big change. You know, you as you said, they usually got Brad, and then it's usually Dan Hardy. So then you take his spot, and it's like now you have Paddy as well. Like, well done for you know, stepping up and
cheers, mate,
and doing it. Yeah,
I didn't have much of a choice, but it wasn't perfect, but it went okay, I think. So
did you get any tips from Brad beforehand?
Not really. I've watched Brad do what he does. The thing is with sort of presenting is that, like with most things, the if you do it really well, you don't notice it. You know, it's just everything runs. You don't really think about it, and that's like most things in life. If it's done bad, if you notice it, then you're not doing it well. So Brad just nails everything. He knows the timing for everything. He's got the spiel down for everything. He's just a real pro with the presenting and the play-by-play. So it was just like me pretending to be Brad Wharton, basically, and I kind of just bumbling my way through it. Yeah.
So to sort of go off that, then, as you mentioned, it was in Italy. For you, is the many places in Europe you would like to see Cage Warriors Octagon visit?
Yeah, I mean, Rome's a fantastic one for it. Obviously, there's so much history. It's such an iconic location anyway, especially for combat sports, I feel. I haven't, this is the first international Cage Warriors that I've done. I know that they've done a lot of international shows in the past. But obviously, because I started during COVID, they weren't traveling for quite a while. I didn't go to the Belfast one because I was working Polaris. But yeah, I mean, anywhere, I don't know. I think there's talks. I don't think I can talk too much about where they're planning to go, but there's talks of going to France next year. And I think that's not particularly secret because obviously we've got some really great French fighters coming through, and you know, the French fans that follow Morgan around are just completely insane. So I can only imagine if Morgan's competing potentially for a title as well in some point next year in Paris, it's going to be, I mean, maybe even crazier than the Italian fans were for this one. So yeah, I'm expecting to be there, and I don't know, in terms of places, I haven't really thought about where I would like them to go to. I don't know. I'll let them work that out and just crack on with it. Yeah.
So they tell you where to go, and you say, "Yeah, I'm there."
Yeah, pretty much for the most part. Yeah.
So obviously Cage Warriors has got really good record of getting fighters signed to the UFC. It's arguably the place to be outside of the UFC right now. If you had to name 3 fighters on the current roster who are ready to be signed by the UFC, who would you say they are?
Yeah, it's a good question. And yeah, you're right. I think for it's very evident that Cage Warriors is the main route to the UFC in Europe. And I think they've put like over 100 fighters into the UFC, so it's kind of crazy. And some of like the really big names, obviously Conor McGregor, and more recently, you know, Ian Gary's doing great, and obviously Paddy Pimblett's doing great, and all of these guys came up and were champions in Cage Warriors prior. I think the next event that we have in London with that unification bout with the featherweight title, I think it is going to be, you know, with Jordan Vichenik and Paul Hughes. Those are kind of the 2 top dogs, I think, at the moment. I think both of those guys would look great inside the UFC. And I think that whoever wins that fight, assuming it isn't like a razor close decision again, but if there's a really solid victor coming out of that fight, I think that they'll probably be in with a really good chance of moving to the UFC. Trying to think who else is sort of super dominant. I mean, you know, talking about the last weekend, Obviously, Don Woodin was hoping to get into UFC, and it kind of made sense that he'd go to UFC because he just looked so formidable in his last 3 matches, his 3 matches in Cage Warriors. Obviously, Martignoni didn't think that was the case, and he wanted to try and steal that spotlight, and that's definitely knocked him back a little bit, I imagine. Yeah, I can't think who else off the top of my head. I think definitely the next one, Jordan or Paul. I think they'll be looking for a contract, I imagine.
Yeah. So to go into something else then, very close to you. You're a BJJ black belt under Roger Gracie. How did that come about to train under him?
Well, to be honest, I didn't really train under him, to be honest with you. All of my training came under one of his black belts, a guy by the name of Nick Brooks. And he was my instructor from day one, basically. And he was graded under Roger. So that is how I was graded under Roger. I trained with Roger on a number of occasions, and we were affiliated to him for some time. But that's how the grading came about. So technically, I didn't really learn a huge amount from Roger, from first-hand experience anyway. I mean, I'd have trained with Roger, and I've rolled with Roger a few times and got squashed and beaten up by Roger plenty, and kind of watched what he does and have taken inspiration from it. But I wouldn't have ever considered myself a student of Roger Gracie.
Right. Fair enough. So can you talk about the growth and appeal of jiu-jitsu, particularly now with one championship featured in jiu-jitsu bouts? That's obviously just going to increase that interest and growth in it even more.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, jiu-jitsu it's been a very fast growing sport over the last decade and couple of decades, but especially over the last couple of years, to be honest with you, which is kind of weird, because I did a podcast yesterday with a really world-class grappler, and we were having the discussion about a couple of years ago, a lot of people in the sport thought that this might be it, like this might be over. Like during COVID, there was times where it was kind of like you look back and you're like, did that really happen? But there were times where you weren't allowed within 2 meters of someone, and you weren't allowed to shake hands with someone, and they were saying, we will never shake hands again. And you're thinking, fuck me, this is I'm not sure if I'm allowed to swear on the okay, great. I've never done a live podcast before, by the way. It's a first. But I was concerned if jiu-jitsu would survive, and that actually maybe the sport would be completely destroyed. So that what we saw was sort of the opposite effect when people were coming out of the lockdowns, which was a massive boom in jiu-jitsu and it becoming even more popular than it was prior. I mean, we're already at that stage relatively soon after everything's calmed down, that we are way bigger than we were prior to all of that stuff kicking off in the first place. And so jiu-jitsu has always piggybacked on the success of MMA. Obviously, MMA was the UFC was designed as a showcase for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu with the Gracies originally, and with Royce Gracie and Rorion Gracie. It was just the most dramatic advertisement basically for Jiu-Jitsu that they could have imagined. And obviously the UFC's gone on to be one of the biggest sports in the world, undoubtedly. So Jiu-Jitsu has always piggybacked off of the success of MMA. It's a lot more accessible than MMA in terms of anyone can really train it, and it's relatively healthy compared to MMA, where you can wear head guards and you can spar light, but if you're getting bashed in the head, elbowed or kneed or kicked or whatever in the head or punched, it's not good for you. So there are a few people who will be put off by that. So jiu-jitsu is as jiu-jitsu means in Japanese, the gentle art. It's not gentle sometimes, but it can be a lot more gentle. Getting punched in the head is never gentle. So it's a lot more accessible to the general public, I think, and especially for kids and stuff like that. Some MMA purists may completely disagree with me on that, but that's my take on it. And then it's been like a fad for celebrities for a number of years, but then recently in the last couple of years, it's kind of gone crazy. Sort of everyone who is anyone, basically, if you don't train jiu-jitsu, you're like a loser, like in the world of sort of A-list celebrities. There's kind of the ones who train jiu-jitsu. Obviously, we have Tom Hardy, who's not just training jiu-jitsu, but competing in jiu-jitsu, which is so cool, because those are two extremely different things. He's being so vulnerable, putting himself out there and competing. And I mean, he is probably in the process of doing more for the sport than anyone has ever done for the sport, which is kind of crazy. The biggest name in jiu-jitsu is a blue belt at the moment, which is the funny thought. But you know, it's been a fad for I don't want to say fad because it implies that it's something that's going to pass, and you know, hopefully it doesn't. But it's been something that's been very popular, sort of disproportionately popular with high achievers and celebrities. I mean, I was listening to Joe Rogan chatting to Mark Zuckerberg recently about how he's got into it and he's in love with it and he thinks it's the greatest thing in the world, which is completely bonkers, especially the amount of power over popular culture and over society that people like that have. So jiu-jitsu it's in a really special place. It's in a really interesting place at the moment, and it's going to see what happens with that. I mean, like you said, you mentioned ONE FC are really leaning into the jiu-jitsu side. They signed loads of fantastic grapplers. They got Mikey Musashemi. They've got you know, I think they signed Ton. Obviously Tonan's fighting there in MMA as well. I think they signed Gordon, but he's yet to compete in it. They have Tommy Lanica. Look, basically loads of really exciting grapplers. The Relutos have competed over there. So that one are doing great things. And then we just had the ADCC that was 2 or 3 weeks ago. That's the biggest event in grappling. That is the Olympics of grappling, but it's been really taken to the next level recently by Mo Jassim, who is the head organizer of that. And they've just pumped a huge amount of money and they've turned it into something that looks really professional. Whereas, I mean, I competed in ADCC back in 2011. Back then, it even though it was the biggest show in the world, it did not, if you had shown footage of the event, or if you had someone who didn't know grappling come to the event, they would have thought this is amateur as fuck. Whereas if anyone watched the recent ADCC, this looks like a world-class event that it is. So big things are happening, and hopefully there's a domino effect and it continues to pick up even more steam as we get more investment into it. More eyes on the sport equals more investment in the sport, and then more investment in the sport hopefully equals more eyes on the sport. So hopefully there's a positive feedback loop going on, and it just gets bigger and bigger, and it's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Seemed like COVID and lockdowns just like starved everyone who was doing it, and then as soon
it
as
does.
it was over, just straight out and straight back to it.
Yeah, it really did feel like that. People, I mean, I definitely wouldn't. I don't know. I was going to hesitate to say that maybe lockdowns was good for jiu-jitsu, but maybe it was. I think so many people had like, you know, the trying to take the silver lining from lockdowns and from that experience. And obviously there was lots of really terrible things with a lot of people suffering really bad mental health issues. Obviously lots of people died. So don't get me wrong, I would have preferred it not to have happened. But when those sort of tragic things do happen, you do try and find a silver lining to it. And I think for a lot of people who didn't suffer too badly, it was sort of a moment for them to reflect and to become perhaps a little bit more introspective, and to try and take control over their health a little bit, and to maybe start exercising. A lot of people got into shape over lockdown and were able to continue that. And then, yeah, like you said, they were sort of caged up for 6 months, a year and a half. And then when they were let go, they were like, damn it, I'm going to, you know, I don't know when I'm going to be able to do this again. We might get locked up. So I'm going to go out and do whatever I want to do and try and stay fit and get fit and get new hobbies and stuff like that.
Yeah, definitely. So the next one, where did Raspberry Ape originate from?
The one question that I guarantee to get in every podcast.
Is it?
So I'll give you the truthful answer. The truthful answer is that I used to just really like raspberries. I mean, I still do like raspberries, to be honest with you. And I needed a nickname that was unique, and if you searched for it, nothing else would come up. And I really like apes as well. I really like gorillas and stuff like that. Yeah, exactly. So that was basically how it came about. But it was also sort of ambiguous enough and intriguing, titillating almost, that people would always ask that question. It gave me an opportunity to make up ludicrous tall tales about where the name actually came from. So I had many iterations. Back in the day before podcasts got popular, I'd get a lot of written interviews for blogs and stuff when blogs were popular and podcasts weren't. And I would come up with elaborate tales that I would tell then. And then when people started podcasting, I could usually I'll normally tell people the truth, like I'm telling you now. But occasionally, if someone asks me in person and I'm in a good mood, I might spin a web of lies and deception. But then at the end, tell them that I was just bullshitting them.
What's been your favorite elaboration then?
I'm glad you asked.
So
the one that I use at the moment is, okay, I'll tell you the story and you can see if you can work it out. So the tale is that when I was a toddler, I was at the zoo with my parents, and being the inquisitive youngster that I was, I crawled and managed to find myself falling into a gorilla enclosure. Obviously, everyone freaks out. This gorilla comes and he sees me, and he seems very, very interested in me. Everyone's freaking out. They're screaming, something's going on. There's chaos, there's havoc. They go and get the park warden, and he comes with his gun to shoot this gorilla in order to save my life. But then a quick thinking member of the public throws some raspberries in, and unbeknownst to him, it was actually this gorilla's favorite treat. So the gorilla goes over to the raspberries and is distracted by them, and it gives them enough time and space to remove me without killing the gorilla. And I always thought back, it was very imprinted on me, and I always remembered the Raspberry Ape, and that's how I got the name. And of course, that's an adaptation on what? Come on,
Harambe.
Thank you very much. I was gonna, if you didn't get that answer, I was gonna hang up this call right now. Yeah. So it was. I just adapted the Harambe story. So that's but I'll tell that sometimes as if it's genuine, and people will be like, "Oh my god, I can't believe it."
Leaning in and everything, like, "Wow, what happened?"
And then I tell them, "No, it's complete bullshit." But there's been a few actually, and there was one mad one about my great grandfather in the Vietnam War and stuff like that, and they were ridiculous. I mean, if you'd actually listen to it, they were ridiculous stories, and it made its way. I competed on EBI a few years back, and they made their way onto that, and they were like, "Oh, there was a countdown show, and they were saying his grandfather fought in the Vietnam War," and I was like, "Oh god, no, it's all lies."
I weren't expecting it to go that far.
Yeah, exactly.
Can I ask, did you ever get a call from Coldplay?
From Coldplay?
When they were doing Adventure of a Lifetime and all that?
No.
Could have been featured in it.
I missed the trick there.
So sort of to move alongside that, then in 2016 you launched the Raspberry Ape grappling program.
Yeah.
What was the
homework?
what was the initial goal when you were launching that?
So I started teaching. I've been teaching jiu-jitsu since 2007. So I've been teaching jiu-jitsu since I was 16 years old, a lowly blue belt. But at the time, jiu-jitsu was a lot smaller, and you could get away as, I don't know how I got away as a very skinny. I was about 55 kilos, skinny blue belt, 16-year-old. Teaching adults, and I started teaching there, and I think I kind of credit that for a lot of my development in the sport, and also obviously for my ability to teach now, because I have a lot of experience teaching. So I taught a weekly class at a gym called Mill Hill BJJ, which is now no longer associated with what it was originally. It's still the same name, but it's nothing to do with us. And I taught a weekly class there. Altogether, I taught for 12 years straight, just before I left Mill Hill in 2019. But I was teaching like 1 or 2 classes a week for many years. And then it sounds about right, in 2016. Yeah, that is right. No, earlier than that. Maybe 2015, 14, 15. Anyway, around about that time, I was given the opportunity to start a full program. So instead of teaching 1 class a week, I was able to do a full no-gi program. And that was really massively game changing for me. It allowed me to actually make some money doing this, doing jiu-jitsu and teaching jiu-jitsu. And it was a great experience, and allowed me to build a competitive team. We were out there winning tournaments and stuff like that. And it was good times. And I stopped doing that in 2019. I just didn't, I didn't see any growth at the place that I was at, and I wasn't getting any younger. I wanted to do a little bit of traveling and focus on myself. I was focusing so much on the students. I wanted to focus on myself a little bit more. And so I left in late 2019 to travel. And then I traveled for a couple of months and COVID happened and I couldn't travel anymore. So that kind of was very bad timing. At least I got like 4 or 5 months of traveling out of it before everything closed down. But yeah, and then over the couple of years that wasn't something that we were able to really do. And traveling still a kind of ball ache even now. Over that time I kind of like, I'm not really interested in traveling. I want to get back to start teaching full time again. So I'm currently in the process of looking for a gym to open, but it's very difficult. There's very few in London, North London especially. There's very few available commercial buildings to start one. But if anyone listening sees a nice big open space for me to rent, let me know.
Help your man out.
Yeah. Yes, please.
So to come back to that same year, then you mentioned it earlier, you started the Raspberry Ape podcast. Was the plan for that to always be a documentation of UK BJJ?
That's a fantastic question, because you're right. That's kind of what it became, but there was no intention really with it. The reason I started the podcast was
everyone else is doing it.
Kind of, yeah. But like, yes, do you know what? At the time, there wasn't a lot of podcasts out. It was something that was starting to pick up, but there wasn't much out there. Everyone was like thinking about starting a podcast, but they hadn't done it yet. And I was doing a lot of traveling at the time. I was traveling around and doing seminars, so a lot of driving, and I had a dog. And I was doing for the first time and was walking my dog a lot. And when you do these, you've got headphones on and you usually listen to music, same when you're driving long distances. And I was listening to the same damn music over and over again. And I started to get really bored of it. This is kind of wearing a bit thin. So I thought I'd check out this thing that I'd heard about called podcasts, because I'd never listened to him before, and Joe Rogan's podcast specifically, and a few other ones, but mainly Joe Rogan, even at the time was one of the biggest podcasts in the world, especially if you're into combat sports and interesting topics like that. So I started listening to Joe Rogan and I thought, this is really cool. I'd love for there to be a UK jiu-jitsu based podcast. So I had a look and I think there was one or two, and I listened to them. And I just didn't think that they were super great. I thought, I reckon I can do a better job at this. So that's why I started the Raspberry Ape podcast. There was no real idea of what it was going to be. I think sometimes having goals and having a vision of what you want from something is really important. And I think other times it's nice not to have that. And it's nice to have just to plant a seed and just to let it grow, and whatever happens and keep it really organic. And that's what happened with the podcast, which was I announced that I was doing a podcast. And at the time, I had a small level of notoriety in the community, being a very small, close-knit community. And people were excited. And I put the first couple of, I started putting episodes out and people really loved it. And I didn't know what I was doing. I had no experience doing anything like that. I could talk, I guess. I taught for many years, but I didn't really know what was going on. And it just went from there. And we're coming up to, I'll be doing my 100th episode in the next couple of months, I imagine.
Nice. Congrats.
But yeah, as you said, what started to happen is I would talk to people within the jiu-jitsu community, interesting people within the jiu-jitsu community who I was close to begin with, kind of used up my immediate circle before I started to chat to DM strangers. But what would happen is I just say, tell me about your journey, and it started to become this documentation, almost audio documentation of the history of UK jiu-jitsu, as I talked to all of these old school grapplers who were around there at the beginning. And it did create this intricate web which is just so interesting, where you'll hear this guy will talk about going and visiting this gym and say, oh man, this guy was crazy. And then someone else would go, oh yeah, I was training with him for 10 years. And then you kind of, all of these stories and all of these individuals would interconnect and integrate throughout kind of the very early days, especially of jiu-jitsu, when it was a very small, close-knit community and there were only a couple of people doing it. So we still have episodes like that, where I talk to guys who were there very close to the beginning or at the beginning, and they continue to add to that documentation. I do love that part of it, that, you know, hopefully jiu-jitsu continues to be popular for many years, and in 20 or 30 years time, when I'm sure some of the people involved in the sport at the beginning are either no longer involved in the sport or have moved somewhere else, or perhaps have even passed away. But people will continue to be able to hear those stories from the people who were there at the beginning. So hopefully they'll, you know, assuming that there isn't some sort of apocalyptic event, which is very possible with recent news, but assuming there isn't an apocalyptic event that destroys the internet, those stories will be in the cloud, so to speak, for all time, which is pretty cool.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
it's good because you're not just documenting like just that individual's journey, it's showing you the journey of jiu-jitsu as well, from then until, you know, recent point in time, you know. So you get to see the growth of jiu-jitsu in the podcasts as well.
Yeah, and I think what the most interesting thing is about jiu-jitsu is that it's such a new sport, especially internationally. It goes back a little bit further if you look at it, kind of the start of it in Brazil, but in America, and especially in Europe and the UK, you're talking about 20, 25 years is the entire length that the sport has existed in the country. Imagine being able to like listen to an audio recording of like Jigoro Kano, who created judo, or, you know, the people who started various other sports. There was just no opportunity for that depth of conversation and documentation to be made. So we just very lucky that jiu-jitsu was created in, you know, the sort of the 90s. Well, came to the UK in the 90s, the early noughties, instead of in the 1800s. You know, we're just very lucky for that.
Next one for you then. We sort of didn't want to ask you this, but we will.
Yeah, go on.
Who's been some of your favorite guests on the podcast? Great
question. I mean, I've been very, very fortunate to have a huge number of really great guests. And, you know, I always record them in person as well. So it's always a true kind of human experience, sitting down in front of someone and really having that connection with them. So I've been very, very fortunate and very lucky to be able to do that with a lot of great people. In fact, there are very few people that I've had on the podcast that I haven't had you know, but there are only a couple. I definitely won't name names there. But for the most part, I've had like a really fantastic experience with many, many people on that podcast, almost all of them. And but if I had to pick some out, I mean, there's been some great episodes. I had the second episode with Simon Hayes. He was episode 3. The episode 3 was sort of like an iconic episode that very, very early. You know, I had one of my best friends was the and strength and conditioning coach was episode 1. A good friend of mine, a student of mine, who's also my sports psychologist, was episode 2. And then I've reached out to Simon, who was sort of a very well known, very well respected member of the UK BJJ community, for the 3rd episode. And he just delivered this incredible episode about, because he's I'm not sure if you're familiar with Simon Hayes. He's a black belt at Carlson Gracie, London, but he's also he was a competitive BMXer back in the day and when he was a youngster, and he's also one of the best sound engineers for movies in the world. So he's actually an Oscar-winning sound engineer. So he just had some fantastic stories about how he started jiu-jitsu. He was basically introduced to jiu-jitsu by Guy Ritchie. Yes, the Guy Ritchie, on a film set, training with him, and, you know, training with Jason Statham and guys like that. And then he's massively into bulldogs, and we were just talking about bulldogs, and it was just a killer. And I did a second episode with him just a couple of weeks ago. I think maybe 1 week ago I released that, and I said at the beginning of that, I do think that actually that one episode had a massive impact in the success that the podcast had overall, because it was so great. So Simon was really fantastic. I've had some fantastic people on, really high level guys. one of my favorite guests, Mauricio Gomez. When you talk about the history of UK Jiu-Jitsu, he is the godfather of UK Jiu-Jitsu. He's very well known for kind of as the godfather of UK Jiu-Jitsu. He's Roger Gracie's dad, and is the reason why we were able to get Roger Gracie in the UK. He started kind of the first, he really kicked everything off. There were a couple of other people knocking about, but Mauricio's just, and a very, very humble guy, and a really, a very charismatic character as well. And we did like a 3.5 hour podcast, and it just flew by. And that was, you know, one of the best. I had the crazy bastard that is Kurt Osiander on. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with Kurt Osiander, but he's just a madman, and it was a mad episode and just insanely entertaining. You know, keeping it with the MMA. I mean, I have had some great MMA guests on. You know, I had Mark Goddard on. We had a really, really great episode. Again, I think it's like 3.5 hour episode, and he spoke about some stuff that he said he's never spoken to anyone about before. So that was a great episode. We got really deep on a lot of things on that. And then the kind of relatively recent episode that I had with Dan Hardy, that was one of my favorite episodes, because Dan, we're just on the same wavelength with a lot of stuff, and he's such an interesting guy. And it was martial arts and philosophy and history and everything in between. So that's the thing. I think the longest one I ever did, which was almost 4 hours, and I had to get off to somewhere. I feel like we could have chatted all day. So those are just a couple of those are kind of the most popular episodes that I've had. But I've had some guests on that nobody's heard of, or that not a lot of people have heard of, weren't as well known, and even maybe haven't even been particularly well listened to. That were really great guests. I actually had the biggest, the highest, maybe not the highest, but certainly up there. But one of the most well-known people I had on the podcast is actually literally the least listened to episode that I had. I had a gentleman on, a fantastic man called Sebastian Junger, who it's possibly that it wasn't well taken up because he's not particularly well known in sort of the martial arts or BJJ community, because it was nothing to do with jiu-jitsu. I've had a couple of episodes that weren't to do with jiu-jitsu, but not too many to anger my very jiu-jitsu and MMA based fan base. But I heard Sebastian on Tim Ferriss's podcast and Joe Rogan's podcast, which he's been on twice. Have you guys heard of Sebastian Junger?
No.
So he wrote a book called Tribe. You might have heard of the book Tribe, which is a fantastic book, and anyone listening, I'd recommend to check it out. And he also did an Oscar-nominated or possibly won documentary called Restrepo. Sebastian was a war journalist, and an author and a filmmaker, and he's just an incredibly interesting guy. And I got the obscene opportunity. Basically, one of my fans heard me talking, sort of gushing about him and the book on an episode, and she was basically messaged him and was like, "Do you want to go on this guy's podcast?" And he said yes. I couldn't believe it. So I chucked all of my mics in a bag, and I went to this fancy hotel in London where we were staying, and we sat down. We had a great chat. So that was a real honor. And there's been a few episodes with people who were just kind of hidden gems, people who aren't big on social media or aren't super, don't put themselves out there, but someone's come and they've gone, "Dan, I know this guy," or "This guy's my instructor. He's really interesting. He's got an amazing story, and I've never heard of him." And I go, "You know what? Fuck it. Yeah, go on then." And then I have a chat with them, and it just blows my mind. It's fantastic. So yeah, loads of great episodes, thankfully.
Yeah, we know all about that. Some of our more well-known guests are least viewed on the likes of YouTube and stuff like that. And you see, we'll get the local lads on who only maybe people from Liverpool are aware of, and they've got these massively high views. But I think it's more what we found anyway is they share it more than your bigger guests will.
Yeah. You might be right.
Going to get. We feel like it gets more eyes on it because of that. But the views for us, I don't know if you're of the same mindset, is sort of inconsequential. We're just happy to speak to these people and get their stories and hear about their experience within the sport and stuff like that. But no, I mean, looking at some of the people you had on earlier on the podcast, I mean, some of the names are just phenomenal, and you've obviously clearly done a fantastic job at it. So
I appreciate that. Thank you.
The 100th episode is going to be. I'm assuming you've got something special planned for the 100th one.
Fingers crossed. I've got a guest in mind that's a little bit tricky to pin down, but I'm hoping that I have a particular guest in mind for 100. So stay tuned for that. Yeah,
can't wait. So moving away from that a little bit, then. So you show some very unorthodox techniques on Instagram, so like incorporating towels and bricks into your workouts. What was your first experience of doing stuff like that, or is this just something was it just a way to keep yourself active when you haven't got the equipment of a gym, say?
Well, yeah, great question. I mean, so I got into strength training, like I mentioned earlier. I was a very skinny, kind of weak kid. And when I started training, there was no kids classes. So I was thrown in the deep end as like a 50 kilo, 15-year-old, getting the crap beaten out of me every day by these adults. And it's quite fun. I remember thinking, this 70 kilo guy was like a giant to me. Now I look at a 70 kilo guy now, like, I mean, and this is no offense to any 70 kilo guys, but I look at a 70 kilo guy as like, this is a very small human being that I will be able to just crush. You know, no offense to any, there's some great 70 kilo fighters and grapplers out there, but just, you know, it's not a big person. But I remember when I started training, I look at these 70 kilo guys like they were 120 kilos, you know. And I remember thinking I'd get beaten up sometime because they were stronger than me. And I remember thinking one day I will be strong and I will be able to smash you and you won't be able to do what you're doing to me. And then I was kind of given a book called Dinosaur Training by a guy called Brooks Kubik. And this became the Bible for me. I got it when I was 16 years old, and it really sort of, the dinosaurs that he refers to in the Dinosaur Training were the old school strongmen. And a lot of old school strongmen were also wrestlers. So that there was a lot, it really connected to what I was doing. And I kind of just absorbed this book, you know, cover to cover, and started to integrate the ideas into my training. And as I'm reading it, I like join a gym and I start working out, and I start, you know, it's just about barbell, strong, add weight, you know, just be a big, strong fucker. But he spoke a lot about these chrome and fern gyms and kind of these fancy, shiny gyms. You don't want that stuff. You want to be a garage gorilla. And I was like, you know, by the time I got to the end of the book, I was like, screw this. I'm just going to get some, you know, chunks of metal and I'm just going to lift them in my garage. And that's where it all started. And at the time, the garage was full of shit. And I bought a thick barbell, 2.5 inch diameter barbell, which is massive. I mean, bigger now than I really would use for most or almost anything. I bought this 2.5 inch non-revolving handle, no knurling, thick handled barbell, and like 90 kilos of weights. And I just started working out 3 times a week, doing the same stupid exercises over and over again. And I had nothing, no equipment at all apart from that. I'd take it out of the garage and I'd do it in the front garden, off of cardboard boxes. Legitimately, my bench was just like a couple of stacked cardboard boxes, and deadlift platform was cardboard boxes on the ground. And then it kind of just built from there. And I was having to be really smart, sort of MacGyvering my way of having, you know, finding other ways to train. I had just a chain from like B&Q that I'd use, and I'd put weights through it. I'd use it as a weights chain, or I'd wrap a towel around it so it wasn't cutting into my skin and stuff like that. But then over the years, continuing to be really into all of it, I amassed one of the most comprehensive and collection of strength training equipment specifically for grappling that maybe the world has ever seen. So now I have, you know, every piece of equipment you can possibly imagine that it's spilling out of the garage. But I still kept that mentality of finding a way to do something. That sort of pragmatic problem solving has been something that I just love doing. It's one of the reasons why I love jiu-jitsu, but I love problems. There's nothing better for me than a problem. I want problems. What's that mean? I don't want solutions. I want problems, but it's like that. But physical problems, especially, I love. I want to find a way to do it. I'm going to get some duct tape and I'm going to get some sticks and I'm going to do this. I remember walking into the gym one day and we had kind of mats against the wall and there was a small gap and someone had dropped their phone down the back of this. And I was like, there's no way they're getting their phone back. There's like a 2-inch gap there between the window. It's gone forever. And I walk in there, I'm like, okay, this is my dream. So I'm like getting coat hangers and plastic bags and sticks and duct tape, and I'm making this thing and I'm going down there. That sort of stuff I love. And I kind of never lost that ingenuity side of it. So even though I have a lot of equipment, you can take things that aren't designed to be trained with, and you can find ways of training them, or you can take things that are designed to be trained with, and you can find even more expansive and interesting and intriguing and challenging ways of doing it. So yeah, that's kind of where my strength training journey's been. A lot of the stuff that I post with bricks or with towels and stuff like that. I mean, towel is super useful. I use it kind of all the time, but it's also content that people like, because not a lot of people don't have the massive resources in terms of strength training equipment that I do. So yeah, I just try and keep it fresh.
Yeah. I think right now as well, with the cost of living and everything, like incorporating these kind of things is going to be really useful for people going forward as well. So it's giving people options to keep up the training if they maybe can't afford to.
Yeah, that's it. And a massive part of it is, I think a lot of people will try and find excuses not to do stuff, and I think it could be a kind of a hole that a lot of people fall into, even not on purpose. But you might think, oh, I don't have money to afford a gym, or I don't have time to go to a gym, or I've got to be home with the kids, and I don't have equipment, I can't afford kettlebells, or I don't have kettlebells, or I have no space to put them. I go, fuck it, get a rock, get a fucking rock and a sledgehammer, a one resistance band, and you're good to go. You can train, like go into the woods and pick up logs. Like there's really just, there is no excuses. And you see, it's very easy for me to say when I have all of this equipment, but there was a time that I didn't have that equipment. And I think it's just trying to show people that you don't need anything to be able to train. You can like anything that you have, you can find. I'm trying to find like a cardboard. This is a box for my thing. You can get something like a cardboard box and you can train your pinch grip on it, or you can get anything. You could get a microphone stand and you can use it to train your wrist. So I'm just trying to go, despite what your situation is, there is no reason that you can't get some sort of training out of it, not as ineffective, but as minimal as that may be. You could do something, and I think it's a really important message.
Yeah, I found myself the other day, like I had a little lazy band away as thick as the one that you did, but I was doing this with it. It's a little tiny thing, but you still felt the resistance in your wrist. Yes. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah, exactly. That it's a great example. Yeah, there's a people think if you're not doing the most efficient thing, then don't bother doing anything at all. This all or nothing mentality. Now, if you can do that, look, if you want to be a pro athlete, if you want to be on a championship winning grappler, if you want to do anything to the highest level, then you need the best resources. You need to train in the most intelligent way. You need to do everything spot on. 99% of people are not in that situation. So don't try and don't think that you have to train with the resources that a professional athlete needs to train with in order for you to get improvement. Any improvement is better than nothing. Always be looking to improve.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great message as well.
So the next one, you have some incredible athletes during your career. You've competed at the best events against the best. What was your proudest moment of your competitive career?
Yeah, I mean, I've been very fortunate to compete in some great shows, and hopefully we'll compete in many more. There's two that really come to mind, and they're two very, very different situations. One was not tiny, it was very significant at the time. It was an MMA show called Lockdown FC in Stevenage, just north in Hertfordshire, just north of London. And it was an MMA show. We're talking 10 years ago, I'd say, maybe a little bit more, 11 years ago, maybe more. I was at uni, but it was an MMA show, and they were running a winner takes all £1,000 8-man grappling tournament. And I was teaching at this MMA gym that was setting it up at the time. And they were basically going to make a tournament for me to win. I was like, this is fucking fantastic. This is brilliant. So I was a purple belt at the time, about 75 kilos. And I was doing all right in competitive grappling. And they got a load of people in. I was like, yeah, I could probably do this. And at the time, there weren't a lot of shows doing this. There weren't a lot of shows offering that sort of money and putting that big of a platform behind it, sort of taking that MMA money and putting it into grappling. So these purple belt grapplers that had signed into it were dropping out, and then mysteriously their black belt instructors were taking their place. And it very quickly went from a tournament that I should be able to run through okay to, holy shit, I can't win this tournament. This is ridiculous. I'm a 75 kilo purple belt. I'm all right, but I'm not I'm not the best in the country. but they're like, this guy is incredible. This guy is world class. This guy is you know, competing in the UFC. It just became this insane lineup. And it's the first tournament that I've ever competed in, and I'm very open about it, that I did not think that I had a chance of winning, which is a terrible attitude to have when going into a tournament. But as I probably wouldn't be talking about the story if it didn't go well, but it ended up going very, very well. And I came out there and I won my first match. And then, you know, I won my second match. I was like, holy shit, this is like, and sort of the brackets kind of just worked in my favor. There's a little bit of luck and a little bit of skill. I will also mention that for some stupid reason, whatever, I came out to like the opening ceremony in a Mexican wrestling mask and a cape. So generally not what someone who doesn't think they're going to win a tournament is going to wear. Maybe that was me kind of stacking. I go, oh, don't think you can win it? Let's put all of the pressure on you by looking like an idiot. So I came out with this Mexican wrestling mask and a cape. And it was an under 85 kilo open belt division. And I was like the smallest and lowest grade there. And I ended up winning the entire thing. And that is a moment, I would say it's about 11 or 12 years ago, really a long time ago when I was a purple belt. I've been a black belt for 8 years now. And the feeling of winning that, I'll never forget it to the day I die. Almost a dreamlike feeling, really kind of insane. This sounds mad, but I remember vividly what I thought when I had my hand raised. And this was not like it was well produced. It was a small MMA show, you know, so but nothing like I'd ever felt before, because I'm used to doing grappling in a sports hall. So it was this big step up. In the cage adds a lot of intensity as well. There's cameras, there's lights. It's just more professional than anything that I'd ever done before. And I was very young and early in my career. But I had my hand raised and the feeling was so good. I remember thinking, I hope someone just shoots me in the head and kills me right now, because this is the best feeling that I remember thinking. It's a very strange thing to think, but it was a weird thing. And that's kind of why I remember it. But it was this insane high. It's very, very difficult to describe. And I was kind of in shock afterwards as well. I remember I was going around and people were congratulating me. And I was like, I can't believe I won. I can't believe I won. And this went on for hours, like someone gets knocked in the head and keeps repeating the same thing. So that is a very, very special tournament for me. That was like the first event that I came out as the Raspberry Ape. And it was like, kind of kicked everything off for me. I was at university at the time, and winning that tournament made me quit university. Basically, I was like, I want to do this more and I don't want to do anything else. So that was a massive moment for me. And I'll never forget that. And then the other one is when I did the first ever, I was very fortunate again to be involved in the first ever team grappling event, which is called Quintet. Lots and lots of variations of that have now come out of that, but that was the original team grappling event. It was run by, I got sent a message saying, do you want to be part of a team grappling event? I go, hell yeah, that sounds awesome. They go, it's being run by Sakuraba, legitimately my hero, in just my hero in general, like number one, top of the top. And I was like, you're fucking kidding me, 100%. And they go, it's going to be in Japan. And I'm like, I've always dreamt about competing in Japan. I was a big Pride fan back in the day. When I first got into jiu-jitsu, my goal was to compete in MMA. And then I just kind of went down the jiu-jitsu path. But of course, when I had these ideas and fantasies of competing in MMA, I wanted to compete in Japan. So there isn't a lot of grappling that goes on in Japan, or there wasn't at the time anyway. So I thought that that would probably be unlikely to ever happen. So when I was given this opportunity, this massive show on UFC Fight Pass, run by Sakuraba, this crazy new team grappling format, and it's going to be in Tokyo, Japan, it was just like, this is insane. This is amazing. And we went out there and we had this event, and I got a good run in it. I submitted to basically winner stays on. So if you win the match, you stay on, and if you lose the match or if you draw the match, you're off. And I submitted two of the Japanese competitors, and then something that I could not in my wildest dreams have ever imagined, competed against Sakuraba. Okay. Yeah. Oh, and no. Even when I say it now, I go, did I actually do that? And I remember I took out two guys that I really respected very much. And after I submitted the second one, you get like a 30-second or a 60-second break. I went over to my corner with my friend David there. He goes, it's Sakuraba now. And I was like, what? What are you talking about? And then I had this, I was in a really fortunate position at the time, because basically the way that quintet would work is if you lose a match, you're kind of taken away from the team. If you win and lose or if you draw one match, you're kind of neutral. You're not really giving anything to the team. And if you win a match and draw a match, then you've added to the team by taking out two opponents. So that was very important. You feel when you're in this team environment, you want to add to the team. So I was in a very lucky position where I had taken out two athletes already, and I knew that I wasn't going to get submitted by Sakuraba. So if I drew with Sakuraba, I could take out three guys and go, okay, I've done my job. You guys take out the rest of everyone else. So it put me in this position where I could really have fun, and I didn't have to try. I did not want to submit Sakuraba. The guy said to me afterwards, man, you should have gone for it. Like, I could not do that. That would not have been as pleasant an experience. So I really could not have written this scenario any better. If I had to compete against Sakuraba first, for example, I would have had to have submitted him, and it just would have taken away from the experience. I genuinely believe so. So I had this amazing match with Sakuraba, and it was just kind of completely dreamlike, insane, starstruck experience. And then we won the entire event, and it was the greatest day ever. So those are the two main events that I remember the most. One was sort of the beginning of my grappling career, sort of my coming out party. And quintet was this insane kind of once in a lifetime experience that I never even could have dreamed of being able to do. So yeah, it was really cool.
You just thought he was running the thing, didn't think you got to compete against him.
Exactly. Initially, they said he's running it, and then Sakuraba's just a madman, so he just wants the scrap. So they were like, Sakuraba's competing. I'm like, what the fuck? And I remember I took I had a fan photo with him the day beforehand, and I said, like, jokingly, and I may get to fight him tomorrow. Never would I have dreamed that I actually would have been able to, because sort of for that to have happened, there were many, many variables, that the different combinations that could have happened with four different teams. The chance of me, if you'd work it out statistically, the chance of me going against him specifically would have been, absolutely tiny. So the way that it happened, not just going against him, but going against him in a scenario where I could, with good conscience, not try and submit him and just have fun and take it to a draw was just insane. And then I competed on another quintet afterwards, quintet 3, and before I stepped out, Sakuraba came to me with a translator, and he handed me his mask, which was then another just insane, could never have imagined or dreamed. And it's like in my bedroom. If my house burned down, I'd grab my dog and I'd grab the mask, and not in that order.
Kind of like come full circle, because you come out in your own mask at the start, and then
exactly. Yeah, I did catch that, but you're right. Yeah,
you did let me down a bit when you said you put your hand up. I was expecting you to go, "No, where's my cape?"
Yeah.
It's an incredible story though. And a testament to yourself and how much you've worked and being able to get to that level, to then being able to compete with your hero. Like, I mean,
I appreciate that.
Doesn't get better.
No, I mean it's one of those things where you don't expect to be able to do that. You know, I was just because Sakuraba was so mad and he's competed into his 50s, his entire body's broken. You know, I was a teenager when I was watching him compete. But I never watched him and thought I'd like to compete against him one day. I just watched him and thought he's the greatest. You know, he's an absolute hero. For the universe to line that up for me, I'll be forever very grateful.
Yeah,
this type stuff in it.
Yeah. So to finish off, then we always like to have a little bit of fun, get to know you a bit better, on a bit more personal level. So I've just got a few little random questions to finish off with. So nice and simple for you though. So first and foremost, what is your favorite film?
Favorite film? So I've done I've done some quick fire questions before, and I just have no ability to answer anything quickly. So just I just want to preface this segment with saying that if you want me to fire off very quick questions, you're talking to the wrong person. I just talk so much shit. It's basically like between commentary, teaching, and doing a podcast, my job is basically to talk shit, and I just do it unnecessarily. So my favorite film, I would say, is if I cancel out all of the obvious ones, Natural Born Killers.
Unusual one.
Interesting choice, very much so.
I am
when you say take away the obvious ones, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, if you were to take away like Lord of the Rings and Casino and stuff like that, stuff that like would be universally considered to be some of the greatest films of all time. Natural Born Killers is just like, it's a special movie for me. And it kind of relates to everything. I watched that before when I was probably about 16 or 17, and I watched it the night before I did a tournament, and I went and I won this tournament. And that became a ritual from then on, that the night before, every time I competed, I would watch Natural Born Killers. And then it was kind of trimmed down to kind of that scene of, you know, Mickey doing the speech and riling everyone up where it finished with Natural Born Killers. And I'd watch that before every time I compete. And I think I've done that every time I've competed for the last, 10 years or whatever. No more than that, 15 years. Yeah.
I'm going to throw X1 in at the end because you've mentioned them a bit. So but I'll do that at the end. What's your favorite TV show?
My favorite TV show is a show called Nathan For You. Is probably my favorite TV show. And his follow-up of that is called The Rehearsal, which is also up there. But that is, watch Nathan For You. It's the best TV show out there.
Okay.
See, I'm trying to answer them quickly now.
But you've thrown a lot of different unusual answers out, so it's like
I've got to throw unusual answer. I can't just go like, what am I going to say? The Sopranos, Breaking Bad and Sopranos, The Wire. Nah, come on.
No, this is good. It's education for us now.
Yeah.
There you go. I'm always trying to add value to people. Yeah.
Lovely. Appreciate it.
Who is your favorite musician or band?
Favorite musician or band? I don't know. Okay, I'll throw some. Again, if you take out the obvious ones, like I really love AC/DC and Metallica and stuff like that. I'm going to see him in December. I'm really excited for it. A band called The Who, not WHO. The HU. It's a Mongolian rock band that combines sort of traditional Mongolian throat singing with rock, and they are dope. So yeah, The Who.
Okay, that sounds
throat singing.
Throat singing, yeah, exactly like that. but also I love there's a lot of bands that I really like that just do the traditional throat singing. It's a powerful music to listen to. The throat was the original instrument that we had, and there's something that resonates deeply as a human. Sort of, it boils your blood up. It gets you ready for battle. So go check out some Mongolian throat singing.
Yeah. I mean, my throat hurts from just talking most of the time. So how they do that throat singing is beyond me.
I know, and it's amazing. They do. See, I told you, if you give me space, I'll take it. They do like overtone and undertone singing. So there'll be doing this very low tone, and then they'll have almost this whistle above it, and it will sound like it's two people singing, but it will be one person singing these two different notes, and it's just it's ethereal, it's beautiful, it's magical, and it's hardcore. Yeah, check it out.
How'd you do that?
Yeah, it's just like a weird, like it's something that you can do where you can match the frequencies of two different notes, basically.
Wow.
Yeah, I would not try and demonstrate.
Damn it, that's what we were waiting for.
Yeah. Next one, a random fact about yourself.
Oh, random fact about myself. I was on Ninja Warrior. That's a pretty good fact. I was on Ninja Warrior, and Ninja Warrior asked me for facts about myself, and one of them was that I can count to any number, and they aired that any number. Yeah, so Ninja Warrior was good. What other random facts are there? I don't know. I feel like every interesting thing or skill that I have, I'm very open about. So I'm trying to think of something I haven't already said. I don't know. I can do a Rubik's Cube pretty fast, like in a minute or two. Yeah, that's about it. Yeah, nothing particularly interesting. And I love Mongolian throat singer.
Lovely. We got like 4 there, so
yeah,
brilliant.
Have you got any hidden talents, or are they all pretty much out in the open?
Well, I just gave you the one with the Rubik's Cube. No. I don't really have any. I'm like, I can't play any musical instruments. I'll get back to you on the throat singing thing. That will be the one that I'll try and get. I don't really have many talents. I can do stupid stuff, like I can do Rubik's Cubes or juggling or stuff like that, like party tricks, nail bending and card tearing, but it's all kind of the same sort of thing. I'm like pretty into chess, but I wouldn't consider myself particularly good, like maybe a 2 or 3 stripe blue belt, something like that. So basically, no, I have no real talents.
Speaking of chess, I mean, I assume you don't cheat like this whole anal bead scandal.
I try not to. I mean, there's some extreme ways. You got to respect someone. Yeah. I feel like you can't just drop.
I don't
the
even know
cheating anal beads. Okay, so I'll just clarify what he's saying here, which is there's a controversy in the chess world at the moment because it's been basically someone's been caught cheating. And if you want to know how they work out that someone's cheating, it's basically chess computers are incredibly sophisticated, like unbelievable. Back in the times where a chess, where a grandmaster could compete against a chess computer and it be competitive, it's long gone. Chess computers are so many magnitudes of skill above anything that any human will be able to get to, but it means that you can work out, you can see when someone is playing a move that doesn't seem to be at their level. If they play a move or a sequence that is far above what they should be able to do, then that becomes very evident. So there's a lot of programs out there that can kind of tell whether someone's cheating by how they are playing on the board. Now, the whole thing about the anal beads is that I don't think there's any validity to that. I think that it was just basically the world champion Magnus Carlsen was defeated by this prodigy and basically stormed out and said, this fucker's cheating. And they've kind of now said, yes, he is, but they didn't know how. So then people on the internet started saying that he has this vibrating anal bead or butt plug that is telling him, and the crazy thing is, it's not impossible for that to be the case. So I think they've like x-rayed him like before games and stuff like that now, because basically you'd have because I saw someone asking recently online, they were asking like, how would a vibrating anal bead be able to tell you how to play chess? Like, how's it going to communicate that information? But very simply, if you have someone who's not in the room or is somewhere, basically putting the game into a chess computer and then had a way of communicating to them when they were in a winning position, if that vibration happens, knowing that you're in a winning position, then you know what you're looking for and you can find, and I can give you a really, really big advantage at that level of chess. So yeah,
I mean, cheating's just got so sophisticated, hasn't it? Like,
I didn't know anal beads were so fucking sophisticated. Like,
years ago,
just,
it was the major on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire coughing in the crowd, and now it's shoving something up your ass.
Well, okay, so like imagine if someone had a vibrating butt plug, which isn't even something particular, like it's something that exists, it's not particularly sophisticated, and there was someone in the audience who wants to be a millionaire with an iPhone and a button, and you could say, and literally instead of a cough, which is very, very stupid and obvious, the host reads out the answers, and when it's the correct answer, you press the button and your arse vibrates a little bit. I mean,
I love the demonstration of the vibration.
But you know what I'm saying? Like, it would be a really effective way to cheat on something like that. Much easier than chess.
Yeah, definitely.
I feel like I'm giving some people some ideas now.
I was going to say something, but it turned out to be a pun. I said it can't be fast stretch, can it? But obviously it can.
All the checks are there when you go to watch a game show. Now we're going to be so extensive.
Yeah,
you've got to get there 4 hours earlier. Like,
yeah.
Rubber gloves and
bend over, cough.
So from anal beads to what's your go-to takeaway order?
Go-to takeaway order. Usually sushi. I eat pretty clean, and I basically, I'm not a big fan of takeaways because a lot of the time they're full of shit and it makes me feel like shit. But if I have to, it will just
keeps coming into it now.
So yeah, probably sushi or like like a Mediterranean lamb and rice dish would do.
Yeah, nice. So still quite clean. I like it. Who would play you in a movie of your life?
Oh God. Oh, I have no idea. That's such a good question. I've never been asked that question before. I have no idea. I'd play myself. Would be the answer.
think we get that most often, don't we?
Oh, really? Is that the answer? Okay, well, in that case, I can't say that.
How about Tom Hardy?
Yeah, he's a lot older than me, though. I don't know if it works. Yeah.
You can pull off being young though, can't you? You know?
Yeah, maybe. Maybe a young Tom Hardy.
I think yourself's a good answer. You can do your own stunts and that then.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like Tom's a little bit. He's a little bit too sort of solemn and a little bit too moody to play me. I'm a little bit more lighthearted. Maybe. Oh God, I have to get back to you on that one. Yeah.
What about like I know he's a bit older again, but you say a bit more lighthearted, but still action side. What about someone like Ryan Reynolds?
Yeah, Ryan Reynolds. and Ryan Reynolds would probably look younger than me by the time I'm a little bit older anyway. So yeah, Ryan Reynolds would be great.
There you go. If you could choose any superpower, what one would you choose?
It's got to be flying. It's got. I mean, if you like take away all of the physics of it, obviously, because flying would actually be a terrible superpower unless you had like the ability to not be affected by things flying into your face at high speeds or stopping really quickly or slowly.
But if you losing your breath at high altitude,
stuff like that. So kind of all superpowers are kind of fucked. You need to have many superpowers that are sort of surrounding that, but you can't be flying. I mean, that's just the best.
Especially if you love traveling like yourself.
I mean, the thing I hate about traveling is getting on fucking planes. So if I could just fly over there, and I always just think, I just look at birds and I think, you guys have a good life. Pure freedom. The
only thing, those have got to change your name. You have to be like a Raspberry Eagle or something.
Yeah, I mean? Yeah, the flying ape.
the flying ape. Yeah, there you go.
There you go. Brandon's already there.
And the last one I want to ask you, because you mentioned them a bit. What's your favorite book?
Oh, favorite book. Yeah, I mean, I'm a big reader. I have a lot of books. Too many books. My bedroom's essentially someone challenged me to count them. I've got around about 700 or 800 books. Like, I mean, I have a lot of books. I haven't read all of them. I hasten to add. You're gonna have to give me some topics.
Let's make it a bit easier. So, like, what three would you suggest? One for like mental health, one for fitness, and one for having confidence in yourself or something.
Yeah, I mean, if I had to sort of rattle off a few books that I really like, for sort of strength training, I like Dinosaur Training. and you can use that as a base to sort of explore a lot of the other old-time strongman stuff, like Eugene Sando's books and George Hackenschmidt and stuff like that, Arthur Saxon, just talking about sort of strength training from a pre-steroid era where a lot of these guys are also wrestlers, and it's just like really interesting to see that sort of stuff. Books that I really like, I'm a big fan of Malcolm Gladwell's style of writing, so Outliers, David and Goliath, Blink, Tipping Point. He's got a whole section of books, and I'll basically read anything that he writes. Someone that I've been really interested in recently, or over a couple of years ago, is a writer called Michael Pollan, who writes a lot about food, or that's where I first got introduced to him, but I've read a load of books of his since then. The book that I read was called, I think it was called Cooked, something like that. But it's just a fantastic read on food. Legitimately changed the way that I looked at food forever, and changed how I ate, basically. So Michael Pollan's stuff is really good. Oh God, there's so many books that that I could think of. If I had to go to nonfiction, there's a fantastic series. I read almost exclusively if I had to go to fiction, I read almost exclusively nonfiction books. But the only fiction book that I've read in the last 20 years, probably, or no, maybe not that much, but very, very rarely do I read a fiction book. It was a series called the Conqueror series by Con Ingleton, and it's about the Khan dynasty going back to Mongolia. First book is called Wolf of the Plains. It's a 5-book series, and it is just fantastic, talking about Genghis Khan as a child, becoming Khan, taking over all of the world basically, and then his kind of the dynasty of his children and stuff like that. It's this huge 5-book series, and I busted this thing out at like an obscene speed. So that is really, really great if you're thinking about picking up something just for entertainment. But it's historical fiction, so it a lot of the stuff happens, and kind of at the end he talks about the things that actually happen in real life. So that's a really great book if you want something that's a really easy read. There's loads of books. But
your ability to like recall things, like, have you read like a book on that? Because I struggle with that all the time, like recalling things.
Yeah, it's actually quite weird. Because I was having this conversation like really recently. This is a really interesting topic that just because it's so recent in my head. I was talking about something and I was recording some things, and my friend said to me, like, how the fuck are you doing this? How are you just like rattling off all of these things, or like you're remembering all of these things about it? And I was like, oh, I don't know, this is just, and she's like, this isn't normal. And so I think that I have particularly good ability to recall specific things. They just stick in there. A lot of them are useless. A lot of them are completely useless. Like my ability, I was working out earlier with a friend of mine, and I've got like all of these different kettlebells and sandbags and stuff like that. And he trains with me every week. He has no fucking clue what any of these things weigh. I remember my 2 training partners, I was away one week and they came and trained, and they were like lifting the wrong way, and they thought this was this weight and that was that. But I remember like every single sandbag weight to the kilo, all of the kettlebell weights by color and by sight. I like one thing that I got into when I was injured. I injured myself last year. I started collecting herbs. Like teas. It's a really weird thing. That's like an interesting trivia fact, is that I'm really into herbal teas. But I have like 50 teas, and I can recall all of them by sight, pretty much with 100% effectiveness, having looked at them 1 or 2 times, which is, to answer your question, I don't do anything in particular to hone that skill. Right. It's just something that I have. I don't know whether like trying to remember stuff makes you better at remembering. I don't use any, some people who are memorize sequences or cards or stuff like that. Yeah. There's like techniques that you can use to memorize, but it just sticks in my brain, and it's most of it is fucking useless, to be honest.
You're just a natural born recaller, aren't you?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Like a photogenic memory or something, is it? Maybe
it's not. I don't think it's photogenic. I can't close my eyes and imagine it, but like, I think audio's there. Like, I
Yeah.
could. It's just in there. It's a weird
Mm.
one. Yeah, it's funny you pick up on that because it's something that I've been chatting about recently.
Lovely.
Well, that was everything we have for you, Daniel. Really appreciate you taking the time.
My absolute pleasure. That was really enjoyable.
Absolutely
I've done
fantastic
so
chat.
many podcasts. I've really done a lot, especially over the last couple of years, but I've never done a live one. And you guys were like MMA based, so it's sort of not the same usual questions that I get. So I really, really enjoyed that, guys. Thanks for having me on.
No,
We
been our
appreciate your
pleasure.
time, mate.
Been an absolute blast, and thank you so much. So yeah, hope everyone's enjoyed it. Daniel, thank you so much again.
Thank you very much to having me on, guys. And thank you very much for anyone who has listened through me talking nonsense for however long we've been going.
Thank you, mate. Take it easy.
Take it
Enjoy
easy,
your
guys.
night.
Have a good one. I'll catch you soon.
Yeah.